My grandmother read her horoscope and talked to the conjure woman to make the right tea to solve a problem. Some of my friends find peace in yoga and Buddhist meditation. Other Black folk gather crystals, turn tarot cards, and set up ancestral altars, and go to church every Sunday. Or maybe they don't, because churches condemn their practices, but they have no problem with Jesus.
Wade in the water. Wade in the water, children. Wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water.
Welcome to Diverse Devotions, Black Belief Across Boundaries, where we wade into the waters of religious multiplicity, Black faith, and spiritual journeys. Discover what happens when Black spirituality breaks the rules of how being religious is supposed to work. I'm Monica A. Coleman, writer, university professor, ordained clergy person, and initiated Iyala Orisha. In Diverse Devotions, I'll lead you through a tapestry of captivating narratives and thought-provoking dialogues. We'll hear the spiritual journeys of Black folk who practice more than one religion. We'll also hear from individuals whose acceptance of different religions emanates from an understanding of laws of nature and universal spiritual principles. From the freedom of religious multiplicity to the personal journeys of transformation, each episode offers enlightening perspectives that expand the boundaries of Black belief. So, if you're a seeker hungry for knowledge, religiously devout, an educator curious to understand, or simply intrigued by spirituality's rich diversity, follow and like Diverse Devotions. Be a part of this journey, because at the heart of these stories, you'll find the spirit of freedom. So excited to welcome Darnise Martin to the podcast. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Darnise, and I know you're going to enjoy our conversation today. Darnise C. Martin is an adjunct professor at Loyola Marymount University and holds a doctorate in cultural and historical studies from the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley, California. Darnise Martin is the author of 2 books, including the 2005 volume Beyond Christianity, African Americans in a New Thought Church, and co-edited the volume Women in New and Africana Religions. Darnise has written multiple articles, blogs, and contributed to a growing number of academic volumes and documentaries. Dr. Martin is also an active scholar and media consultant. She has been featured on Tavis Smiley's radio program, KJLH Radio in Los Angeles, as well as a number of podcasts and internet radio programs. She was a research consultant on the feature-length documentaries Dark Girls and the follow-up Light Girls for the Oprah Winfrey Network. She continues to conduct research on the diversities of African American religions, particularly the Gullah Geechee and Hoodoo cultures in the South Carolina and Georgia Low Country regions of the U.S. And I'm glad to welcome Dr. Darnise, as she's affectionately called. We have been friends for 25 years, maybe? No, I'm going to say 20. I think it's closer to 20. Anyway, these are conversations we often have, and I'm so excited to bring this to all the listeners of the podcast so that you can hear a bit more about how Darnise understands her spirituality. And Darnise is one of the few people who is a practitioner of New Thought and also a scholar of African American New Thought. So welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Dr. Monica.
Here at Diverse Devotions, we talk about people whose religiosity kind of breaks the rules of how religion is supposed to work. So I would love for you to tell us a bit about your current spirituality or spiritual path and how you came to it, if you were raised in it or you've had a different path to where you are now.
Yeah, I kind of found my way, outside the edges, coloring outside the lines from a young age, not knowing, but coloring outside the lines. So I was born into a family that's, pretty traditional Christian, Methodist, but not narrowly so, not conservatively so, which ended up being a gift to me because I was always exploring the edges, and we didn't go to church all the time. My best friend, her father was a Baptist minister, so I went to church with them sometimes, which just sparked all these questions, really. Since I wasn't in his church every week, I came away with questions all the time, and I would go and ask my mother, "What about this? What about that?" And she said, "Why don't you just ask Reverend Carl?" And I was like, "Oh, I'll just ask him next time I'm over at their house." And then he would give me an answer, and I'd be like, "Mom, he said this. I don't think that's right." And so from a young age, I was already questioning, and I just found my way initially into a lot of Eastern kind of traditions. And then I would say in my young adulthood, found my way to New Thought, even though I didn't know at the time it was really called New Thought. It just answered some of my questions that I had. And I was like, oh, okay, well, this thing, I'm going in this direction. And
So when you say Eastern traditions, what do you mean by that?
oh, well, that's funny you should say that, because my mother would say, where do you get these books? At the library, of course. So I started finding books on Buddhism and Hinduism, um, like, you know, a book about reincarnation, for example, would kind of fall into my hands at the library. I would see something, you know, in Hinduism with all of these different figurines or whatever. It looked to me like, what are these little objects, right? Like, you know, the Hindu pantheon is represented by all of these different, you know, images of gods and goddesses. And so to a young person, it's like, well, what's this? And so I would pick up that book, or I would see something with a Buddha on it. I'm like, what is this? So I was spiritually curious, I guess, right out of the womb, and just following a certain path through looking at different religions. And that's what I say, it was a gift when my family didn't say, you know, you can only do this one thing, or we're Christian, and so you can only think about God in this one way. And so I was free to sort of explore, even though my mother had absolutely no idea what I was exploring, because she would just look at the books I got from the library and say, really, you're reading this? What is this even about? And but it opened, doing that sort of Eastern path kind of opened me up to the world that says there are multiple kind of religions, and there are ways in which people are thinking about spirituality that are beyond your little life. In Cincinnati, Ohio, was a Black girl. There's all of this out there. And I was like, wow. And so I was exploring God through various paths. And I think that's what I'm still doing, really.
I know this story, so I want you to tell the story about you being in New York and getting this pamphlet.
Oh, and the stranger who gave it to me, like,
Yeah. It's such a
oh,
well, I mean, first of all, Darnise has got great stories that are all true, right? But it's such a I just love to hear it. So will you please share this with our listeners?
sure. And so I would say, you know, I'm multiply informed. First of all, let me just say I consider myself to be multiply informed, and I guess grounded in a certain type of Christianity, but still multiply informed and pretty metaphysical at this point. But anyway, in New York, I was in my young early 20s, and I was living in the big city. And because of my curiosity, I ended up at somebody's workshop on a Saturday. I don't know, I can't tell you what workshop it was. But afterwards, I said to this man who was teaching it, hey, you know, whatever I said, and would you teach me, right? Something, would you be my teacher? And he just kind of looked at me like, who are you? And I just was like, I don't know. And I was very shy. People don't believe I was very shy. I didn't talk how you talk to anybody. But I asked this man, and he said, okay, I'll take you on. He goes, there has to be a reciprocity. And so I will ask you for payment, but it won't be very much. But there has to be a reciprocity in this universe. I was like, oh, well, fast forward, we were working together. He was mentoring me. He gave me a pamphlet, right? Uh, gosh, what do you even call them now? They don't have these for a university, right? The catalog. Okay. He gave me a catalog for the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley and said, you know, you should consider going back to school. And I was like, now mind you, I was fairly recent out of my bachelor's program, and I had no intention of going to anybody's graduate school. And he said, just keep it. Because I goes, I'm not going back to school. Just keep it. Well, fast forward some more years. And I left that career. I majored in fashion. I worked in the fashion industry in New York. That's what I was doing there initially. And then I decided, oh no, this is not for me. I don't know how I got on this path, but this is not for me. And so I had moved from New York back to Ohio, where I'm from. And I found that catalog. I found that book. And in it, he had written just like notes, like on a piece of paper. There's a couple things he had written in there. And basically, it was something to the effect, for when you need this. And I was just amazed. I was like, wow. And so that's exactly the school where I ended up going. It was exactly what I needed at that time, when I was in a new place in my mind and in my life cycle of, yes, I'm really ready to explore these topics, the spirituality via an academic path. I have no idea where to kind of look in the world for the things I'm interested in. And I remember I applied to Notre Dame, and I applied to the Graduate Theological Union because of him. And honestly, I go, who was that man? I couldn't tell you if I saw. He kind of just vanished, which he told me he was going to do. He said, I'm going to Scotland at a certain point, and you just won't see me. You know, my phone will be disconnected. I don't know exactly when I'm going, but you'll look for me and you won't find me. And this was what, the early 90s. So there was
no cell phones.
no. And so one day I called him and he didn't answer. The phone was disconnected. And I was like, oh, he's gone. And I had no way of reconnecting with him.
Wow.
And I just think that that's one of those moments where, you know, the synchronicity, where the gods line you up with what's next, right? Line you up like, okay, now you've come to this point. Now there's sort of a crossroads. Here's a person to point you in a direction. Keep going. And so it's an amazing thing that happened in my life. And I think, wow, how might I have gotten here if it hadn't been for him? Because I do think the universe would have still came to get me some other kind of way. Somebody else would have shown up.
So how would you name, like what name would you give to you said multiply informed, but if you had to give a name, which you don't have to, but if you had to, how would you name what your current beliefs are, your current faith path or journey or spirituality?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of cumbersome, like multiply informed, metaphysical hoodooist. It's kind of like how it comes out. And so I say, you know, on social media, I'll say hashtag New Thought Hoodoo. And, you know, I am metaphysically oriented via the New Thought way of looking at the nature of reality as a vibrational universe. Um, as I said, it kind of works its way through a Christianity that was just given to me from childhood,
Mm-hmm.
that I've broadened out exponentially, I think. And then the practice of hoodoo, an African American folk spiritual tradition. And because that's also in my bloodline, in my DNA, and to the extent that it's made me relocate my life back to the Low Country, really the path
Mm-hmm.
that spirit leads me on. It's just like, what are we doing now? And that's, I mean, I appreciate that about my life, but also it surprises me. So I say New Thought Hoodoo, I say metaphysically or multiply informed metaphysics and hoodoo. And I think it works together.
Well, I've known you a long time, so I know it works for you, and I know it works for many of the people that you work with. But can you break this down for us a little bit, right? Maybe not everyone knows these terms well or means the same things by them.
Mhm.
So can you tell us what you mean by the three terms? You said new
Okay.
thought, right? You said metaphysical
Yeah.
and hoodoo, right? And so a lot of times we hear the word metaphysical and people think about those cool bookstores with the incense and the crystals and the candles. I mean, which you're like, how did I get into fashion? I'm like, what kind of question is that? You know, you love shiny, pretty things. That's how you got into fashion. Um, but tell us what you mean by those terms, new thought and
Okay.
metaphysical and hoodoo.
Okay. Yeah, but who said that was a good career path for me, fashion? Um, Metaphysical. So it's a way of understanding the universe itself, right? From the broadest way, like what is the nature of reality? And so in metaphysics, we say it's a vibrational universe. And thoughts create things. Like we are working with a universe that is responsive to our thought by because it is energetic and vibrational. And now the quantum physicists are catching up to say that indeed this is a vibrational universe. And so In New Thought and metaphysics, we affirm that there's one beingness of all, right? There's this principle or universal law called monism, which just means one. There really is just one substance or one God. One might say in another tradition, there's one God. There's one source of all things. And the way we interact, or the way that life itself sort of interacts with us, is via this vibrational universe. And so what we express out into this vibration makes its way back to us. And so it helps us understand that the universe is in fact alive and responsive. And we don't tend to anthropomorphize, where we don't say that God therefore is a man in the sky, or that there are literal angels in human form, right? It's like, take the human centeredness off of this understanding of who first cause is, or universal spirit, like who or what is the creator of all things, and what is the nature of this universe that this being has created. Metaphysics tries to answer that question. And so when I say I'm metaphysical, then that is my understanding about the nature of the universe and how it works. And so some people may say, oh, is that like law of attraction? Yeah, that's kind of like law of attraction, but that's a very simplified understanding about all that I just said, right? The law of attraction says that which is like unto itself is drawn. And so it's a responsive dance then. Okay, I'm thinking this and putting this out, and this is what's coming back to me. And when I'm conscious and aware, then I'm very conscious and aware of what I'm putting out on a regular basis, because I know that's going to show up in my world. And then what else did I say? So New Thought is really just one of the religions that is a metaphysical religion, a religion or set of religions that holds those things to be true. So, as I said, as a young person, I found my way to New Thought as a set of religion, so that one could practice this. Because when I teach in the classroom, their minds are just like, what? I'm like, yeah, so what do you do with that when it's that enormous, right? What are you talking about? The nature of the universe. What am I supposed to make of that, right? Then so New Thought religions help us as a regular sort of spiritual practice put that into daily use. And then I come to the Hoodoo, right, as an African American folk spirituality. Well, as I say, it's in my DNA, right? But it is an understanding that African American people created around using the elements of the universe or of our environment, our planet, to affect things in our own favor, for our own healing, for our own protection. So it can require the use of herbs and plants and anything in nature to affect one's circumstances, shall we say. Sometimes people refer to this as magic, right? Or just a hoodoo folk spiritual practice, where people, African Americans, have the understanding that the universe is alive, right? And I can use certain things in the environment to my advantage. And if that sounds strange to people, like think about, we know that plants have certain properties. For example, there are certain teas that you might drink. If you have an upset stomach, there's certain, ginger is good for that, right? There's certain plants that are medicinal, right? Basically, all of our medicine comes from the natural world. And it's just that scientists replicate it in an artificial way in a lab, and they make it into a medicine in a pill form. But actually, it comes from the plants of the earth. And so African American people understood that, right? Indigenous people all over the world understand that. And so it's like, okay, well, I can make my own tinctures. I can make my own potions. I can make my own teas. I can light some candles, because I understand that when I combine certain practices, lighting a candle, praying to the God of my understanding, using certain plants, I can affect some changes in my life. So overall, it sounds very magical, I know, and like some book you'd find in one of those metaphysical stores you just mentioned. But there it is, in a long-winded kind of way.
Well, one word that came to mind when you're talking is like conjure. Would you say that hoodoo and conjure are similar?
Yes, conjure to as a verb
Yeah.
to um, utilize the natural world to one's own will, really to use elements from the natural world and to say that I first of all have power to do that, or that I connect to a higher source that has the power to create the change that I want to see. Again, think about health, and you think about taking a certain, making a tea out of certain plants to go from being sick to go to being well. And then there's an understanding of like, okay, well, if I can use these things for health reasons, I might also use these same plants or different plants for my protection. If I put together a little sachet of, we call it a mojo bag. If we put some things together into a little bag and I carry it in my pocket or carry it in my purse, I use this as a way to ward off certain other energies. And then, people will ask, well, how does that really work? Well, the nature of the universe is that it is responsive, right? And God has given us this planet, which is in fact alive, right? In the African, like it's the ashe of everything. Everything has an ashe, an essence, an energy. And in a Western world, we tend to really forget that. The empirical message of what of empirical scientific method says, the world is really only what we say it is. And if I can't prove it to be so, then it doesn't exist. And indigenous people are like, I don't think so. Because, I got this thing, right? Because we're more connected to the idea that the world is alive, and I'll use the word divine in the sense of saying it is alive with the ashe, with the chi, with the prana, with the very soul of life. And it's rich and it's ever giving. I mean, look at the change of the seasons. Who's in charge of that? Right? Like life has its own sort of rhythm and its own wisdom. So for any people to say, well, we're in charge of it.
Well, as you talk, it reminds me of, as someone who studied a lot of African American literature, especially Black women's literature and the Black arts movement of like the 1970s, right, moving into 1980s. So much literature has a conjure woman in it, right? This much older kind of grandmotherly figure who's always a little bit bent over and with a garden, right? Who has some very cool role in the plot of whatever's happening.
Right.
And I think it's easy to think of it in this way, like this very older Southern grandmother type, system, right? Or belief or person. And here you are, a contemporary person, right?
Not yet.
On the internet, right? Still talking about the same ideas. And so I think it's really helpful to, particularly if you're someone who reads this kind of literature, say, oh, no, this is still a real thing, right?
Yes, very much alive and well. And I am here in Georgia, the Low Country coastal region, and the Gullah Geechee people are right here, and they maintain a lot of these ways. It's just, I just love it because it's on the surface, right? It is on the surface of the culture, of the Black culture anyway. And, here in Savannah, there's so much culture, there's so much rich African-American culture. I was out last night and I met a woman, she said she was 80, Black woman, 80-year-old, in a little bar because I was listening to a friend of mine who sings. So I went out to support her. And she introduced me to this older woman who goes by the name of Madame Joan. And I was like, oh. And so she started telling me all kinds of things, right? And she goes, well, how did you get here? Now she's lived in New York and LA herself. She's originally from Savannah. Now she's back in Savannah. And she started telling me all these little things. And she said, well, did you know the Black people did this? Did you know the Black? And I'm like, no. She goes, she's beginning to look at me like, nothing. So when you make a reference to like, how often it's depicted in film or literature as an older Black woman doing these things, I feel like I met one of those women last night. She was very glamorous, you know. She
Mhm.
wasn't like, you know, someone who looks the role like she's been out in the garden all day. She was very glamorous, going by the name of Madame Joan.
Mhm.
And she said, take my number down because you know you don't know these things. I'm gonna have to tell you. And she goes, and I'm
Mhm.
gonna have to take you around. Put my number on your phone. And
Mhm.
so I was putting it in, and she says, it's Madame Joan because I'm. She's so, and I was like, yes, ma'am. And I appreciate this region because I find a lot of the spirituality and the history is just kind of like on top.
Mhm.
I find that in New Orleans as well, where you know the city itself is alive with a certain kind of spirituality.
Now, I do think of all of my friends, you have more experiences like this than anyone else, too, though. I don't know if it's your openness to them. You're always like, I was here, and then I met this person, and then this woman came up to me, and then I met this guy I've never heard from. I mean, like, you have several stories like this over time, which I
That's
think is
everyone.
great. Well, and well, I mean, it's a reminder that, right, there are religions that are proselytizing religions, right, where it's very much like part of the mandate is to go and share with other people
Mhm.
about this path, about this way, and to welcome others into it. And there are traditions that are more like, you get called to this tradition.
Yeah,
And, if the path opens and it seems right for you, welcome to it, right? But if you don't, we're fine too, right?
exactly.
And you just have these stories where like there are all these people positioned, right? Through over the course of many years of your life that I don't know if you'd call them guides or angels. I mean, I'd love to know, what do you call them? How do you think of, this part of your own spiritual path? And and over not just a spiritual path, just your life, right? Because it wasn't like you were like out there meditating, you were like in the club, right? So
A lot of things happen to me in the because, as a matter of fact, you know, for the listeners, Dr. Monica here edited a book. What is the name of that book? Ain't I a Womanist, right?
I was just thinking of that
Right,
article.
and I wrote an article in that book about a theological dance floor. What did I call this?
Yeah, like the club is kind of a place for Black religion to happen.
Right,
I'll link to
right.
it in the show notes so people can
Okay.
find it.
Yeah, the dance floor is a sanctuary.
Yeah.
Because indeed, I mean, it's sort of a synchronicity. I mean, I call it synchronicity. I say that my guides are always winking at me, and I'm always in conversation because, in my understanding, right, the universe is responsive and it's always alive, and so I'm always like talking to, I would say her, right, my guide. I said like, maybe just primary responsibility for me, so I'm a handful for her, I'm sure, because I'm always asking her everything. And so she puts people in my way, in my path. And she gives me shopping carts in the grocery store every time I go. And I appreciate that because I never get a cart. I don't like it there. I don't want to be in there long. So I get a hand basket. And this is a very practical thing, actually, for people in New Thought, something that we will do. You
Mhm.
may have heard of people say, oh, you can, manifest a parking space.
Mhm.
A lot of people say that, oh yeah, I've heard manifesting a parking space. Well, yeah, I do. And I manifested one right in front of the spot last night too, directly in front. I was like, and I said, oh, look, you're showing out, right? And so in a grocery store, I
Mhm.
will walk in, I get a little basket, right? Sometimes you do, and then you realize you need more because, oh, I might as well get this, I may as well get that. And I say then, oh, who wants to walk all the way back out to the front of the store and get it? No problem. There's an empty cart right there. She does it all the time. It's a game now. You can kind of gamify. People are very serious sometimes about their faith, like, oh, you don't play with God, you don't play with Jesus. It's a very, whatever the energy that you want to put out, well, you'll meet that, right? And so it can be a light energy, like a conversation of exercising your faith on a regular, everyday kind of basis, just like, hey, once again, I forgot to get the card. So could you just show me a card? And there will be an empty card there. And people might say, well, that you're taking someone's card. No, I look around, there's no one, it is completely empty all the time, right? Parking spaces. So I just really have a certain, I think, overall intention that I move through the world with. And which is important for people who are metaphysically inclined or new thought people, because we have to think about what we think about. We have to be intentional about what it is we want to show up in our lives. Most people are manifesting by default, and they will say, oh, manifestation never works for me. Oh, no, it works all the time. It's that you're not getting what you want, you're getting what you are predominantly thinking. And most of us, because of the hard knocks of life and just upbringing, we tend to think in terms of scarcity. We tend to think of what I don't have or how hard things are. And we know those things, people, we really are experiencing those things. And so, of course, it becomes its own self-fulfilling, and we just keep thinking it, keep thinking it, keep thinking. So then to think about what you're thinking about means, okay, am I thinking of that same old thought? Maybe I need to change my story. Because I keep running into relationships that go terribly wrong, workplace situations that are, terribly bad for me. I keep running into these same things that I don't want to experience. Okay, well, let me check myself. What am I thinking about on a predominant kind of basis? Do I give thanks for the things that I already have? Am I sort of in a chronic habit of complaining? Because those things I think are showing up in my world. I might not be able to control absolutely everything. I'm co-creating my experience, but I can control these things. I say to people, train your mind to see it. What do you mean by that? Train your mind to see what you want to experience. So if you want to manifest a wonderful relationship, train yourself to see wonderful relationships. What do I mean? Okay, how we know that the internet is full of all kind of horrible stories about this one breaking up, breaking these people, and there are no good men, there are no good women, there are no good people, right? There's all of that messaging. Yeah. Well, train yourself to see long-standing relationships where people are happy. And then say, oh, I bet they're not really happy. Mind yourself. Like, is that what came up in your mind? If you think about Denzel and his long-term marriage with Pauletta, you think about Sam Jackson, his long-term marriage. But do you go to, oh, but see, that's your thinking, right? So, okay, clean that up by saying some people are having a really good relationship. Some people really are. And I want to see that because I want that to be my experience. Train your mind to see it. And if that sounds weird, think about whenever you decided to buy a new car, you're just even interested in a car, and then that becomes the only car. You're like, I can't believe there's all these Mercedes on the road. I'm thinking about getting Mercedes now. All I see on the road. We've all had an experience where I was just thinking about such and such, and then there it pops in. Mm-hmm. So if you train your mind to see it intentionally, mm-hmm. then you begin to really see it. Like, oh wow, I didn't even know those people. I've known her for a long time. I didn't know she was married for 12 years. Oh my God, your kid is going off to college? How long have you been married? Oh gosh, you've been married 35 years. They'll just start popping in. You're like, really? And then so you start to pull that in to be your own experience closer and closer, if you will allow it. Now, if your mind tells you, well, that's them, I'm never going to find it, write that down. And then draw a line across the paper and say, I intend to find my perfect match. Because what you're noticing is, I spend most of my time thinking about how relationships are crap. Yeah. But I'm actually, and I think when I'm thinking that, oh, I really want a good relationship. Well, how come you think about how crappy they are? Oh, I should be thinking about how wonderful they are. Yeah.
And this is why you've been a relationship coach for like 25, 30 years. Well, I mean, it requires the way you're talking a kind of consciousness, right? Not meaning, not in a political sense necessarily, right? But being conscious of how you learn, what you think, right? Think about even just people who think about learning styles or love languages. What you're asking is someone to just pay attention, right, to who you are and to how you are. And right, and then go on from there. So you can't just roll through the world, right, with the way you're talking about it.
That's what I mean. Most people are on the default plan, and you get what you get. But the good news is you can at any point change that up and just pick something simple in life. Don't go for the big thing like I'm going to manifest $1 million. So when people say, well, why can't I just manifest $1 million then? and I say, pay attention to the thoughts in your mind about that $1 million. I can't have that. That's too much. Oh no, I don't have, like your own mindset is a set of resistance. That's why you don't have it. Why don't you have it? Think about the resistance you have.
Right.
Now, if you say, I want to manifest more money, and then you walk outside and you find a penny on the street and you think that's nothing. Yeah, but guess what? You said I want more money, and now you have like this is the actual day to day, meaning when something pops in, you acknowledge that it popped in, even though it's not exactly what you wanted. It's just you thinking to yourself, oh, look, maybe my higher self is actually playing a game with me right now.
Well, now this makes me think, right? Is this like a kind of religion that you would convert to, or can people from different religions, maintain this kind of understanding of how the universe works, right? Is this something that people of a single
Yeah.
religious tradition even could uphold? Or is it something like I've left behind? You have to leave behind maybe what you've inherited and convert to this.
Well, we say it's completely compatible with any other spirituality. But from the other perspective, like, I know many a Christian person who feels like they cannot, right? Because for them, their understanding there's only Jesus, and only Jesus in a very particular kind of a way. And so, whereas we in New Thought would say, we're open, well, in religious science of mind anyway, we say we're open at the top, meaning we're always open for the divine to continue to flow in. But there are some people who are conservative in their own particular religious tradition who will say, it has to be in the name of Jesus. Like their understanding is that. And so for them, it will seem like they can't, right? Well, you're worshiping the universe. Why would you worship the creation and not the creator? I've heard, right? Why are you worshiping the creation? It's like, no, that's a misunderstanding. We're acknowledging that the creator is actually all. There's actually nothing that's not the creator. But when they have a very particular understanding about the nature of the universe and who God is and how God operates, then their acceptance of this sort of open-ended metaphysical reality seems just too fuzzy, too broad. And they like and they need, I think they like and they need a very particular path to the afterlife. Like they have a pretty straight understanding of what it takes to get to that good place in the afterlife, and they need to stay on that path. And I understand. I kind of understand. Some people like, just tell me what to do, I'll do it. And as educators, we know that those some high achieving students, they are A students, but they want you to tell you exactly what to do to get that A.
Yeah.
And they will do everything because they're like, at the end of this, I better have an A.
Right.
So please tell me everything, right? So some people are like that. And I find people who are more metaphysically oriented or New Thought oriented, it's less important that we have a name for things and a label for things, because we understand that, okay, what happens and what's in the afterlife? Where do I go in the end? It's like, we're going wherever it takes us. There's the afterlife isn't populated of like, oh, there's pearly gates and streets of gold and angels or whatever. We just assume that there is a continuation of life because there's no way to destroy energy, right? So there's a continuity of life. And on the other side, there's going to be a continuity as well. What exactly does that look like? I don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but I have my ideas, and some of those are shaped because I was shaped by Christianity early on, but we're kind of like, I'm rolling with it, baby. I just trust God. Like I trust God. I trust all that is that, I don't know if we'll have a meeting. Are we having a meeting with God and say, well, do I get to review this lifetime? Am I taking a survey now? Because D, this is a very bad experience. No, we could say, because the general way of people thinking like, oh, Earth is so bad and whatever. So some people may say, I would never choose this, or I would never want to go back to this, but this is the means by which we have an opportunity as spiritual beings to awaken in this human experience. We decide we're going to have a human experience. And the game, so to speak, is, can I wake up and remember my divinity even while I'm in this human form?
I mean, you've given us so much. I was getting ready to ask you about the afterlife, and you told us about that. You've talked about what your spirituality looks like in your daily life. I know a question I often have, and you talk a little bit about it in your book, Beyond Christianity, but not about your personal experience. But what does prayer look like? Right? Is there a concept of prayer? And if not, then what? And if so, what does prayer look like? When you're talking about this vibrational, energetic universe.
Mhm. I mean, New Thought does offer a particular format, so to
Hmm.
speak. It's a very, we call it affirmative prayer, right? It's a way of affirming as opposed to begging or petitioning the deity, right? Like, please, God, give me XYZ. But it's more of an affirming way. But for me personally, it's really what I've been saying, like this relationship I have with the God of my understanding, with my own higher self or angels or whatever term we might want to give it.
Hmm.
um, it's an ongoing conversation all day, every day. Because I'm always saying, okay, well, show me this, or lead me here, or let me see what I should see here. Let me know what I should know here. And to me, that is prayer, because I'm asking for daily guidance, in the moment guidance. And I mean, I remember one time in LA, living in LA, and I was trying to find basically directions. I had lost the specific address of somewhere I was trying to go. I could not find it, right? And I'm like, I kind of know where I'm going because I've been once before, but it had been a long time. And I'm like, it's LA. I mean, who knows really? So I said, okay, I made a deal with my angel.
Hmm.
I'm going to get in the car and I'm going to go as far as I remember. I'm going to sat out on that path going where I know. But there's a certain point where it's completely fuzzy, and I am going to be entirely dependent upon you to drop in and tell me what to do. And that was the deal I made. So it was my prayer. Got in the car and I was like going, I'm like, I get to the place and I get to the end of the place where I know, right? And I'm like, okay, I'm at an intersection. I have to go right or left. And then I said, well, I'm just going to get in the right lane and make the right turn. And I did. And I was like, hey, I'm checking it. Hey,
We good?
we
Yeah.
good?
Hmm.
And I kept going. And I was like, and then it started to look familiar where I was again. I had to go through this little period. It's kind of a metaphor for life, right? I had to go through this period once I made that right turn. This does not look familiar. Oops, have I made a mistake?
Hmm.
Oops, I might be doing it wrong. Oops.
Right.
But I just hung in because I couldn't immediately do a U or anything. So I had to just kind of keep going. And then I was like, oh, here it is. So I was reminded by spirit, I got you.
Hmm.
And I was like, what do you know about that?
So when you talk about your faith journey, right, you have this metaphysical part, right, or at least your spirituality, and then you have this, hoodoo part, right, which is just real black, for lack of a better word. Right. So, given that, is this like a path you would recommend, a path that you would welcome others on? Do you ever feel like a minority religiously among other Black people? Like, will you share a bit more about how, you feel your Blackness, for lack of a better word, right? Your association, your participation in Black communities, and this path, your faith path interact?
Ooh, you said a mouthful. Okay,
I
do
know it's
I
a lot of
feel
questions
like,
at once.
right, like, do I feel like yeah. Well, I've always felt like I've been covering outside the lines for my whole life spiritually. So, in traditional Black religious spaces, which is usually Christianity here in the US, um, yeah, I can't really, I can go, right? But even if I go like several times, right, I'm kind of doing something else internally.
Mhm.
I'm holding it differently. When people are speaking to me, traditional Christians, or Black spirit Christians are speaking to me about, their belief in Jesus, I'm immediately aware again that we're different.
Mhm.
Um, I would invite more Black people to be diverse, to open up, because God is present. God is much bigger than we can say, and there's no reason to fear letting go of labels. And I think many people are afraid, well, if I let go, what will I have? Or will God be angry at me? Excuse me. Will I end up going to hell? Am I losing something that is critical? And I go, no, you're gaining everything. So come on into the light, come on out, right? Like, some ministers will say, come up higher in New Thought, come up higher, which means expand your consciousness, expand your way of understanding what and who God is. It's much bigger than the God that's written about in your text. There's nothing wrong with that text, but it's almost like training wheels. And at a certain point, you've got to take off your training wheels and be willing to engage God in a much bigger way. So I, of course, would invite people to play a bigger game, so to speak,
Mhm.
trusting that God can hold that. God is not going to be mad at you for asking bigger God questions, right? They're just bigger God questions. Um, I don't know. I think you asked me some other questions that I forgot.
No, you've answered them. And I guess a follow-up, so if someone is, interested in, having a more metaphysical approach to their spirituality or having a more hoodoo approach to their spirituality or both, right? Where would they start? What practical steps should they take?
Well, I always start with an altar. I think a basic
Mhm.
altar, if people really want their own practice, right? Like, first of all, you're opening yourself up in your own mindset that this is a responsive universe. God is available to me in multiple ways. It really does not have to be within the confines of a church, a mosque, or whatever, right?
Mhm.
God is available to me. Okay, what is a way that I can connect to God
Mhm.
without any other mediation? Okay, have a little home altar. All you really need is a white tablecloth, a glass of water, a candle, a white candle. Maybe want to think about your ancestors who's ever passed on to the other side, and just ask for guidance. And if you really want to play a game about it, like, ask for guidance on a very particular thing, but keep it light initially, right? You don't want to say, give me the $1 million, right? But ask for something that, there's no real resistance in your mind about it. Like, oh, I'd like to hear from, Uncle so-and-so today, who's still alive, right? I'd like to hear from, and just set up that altar, make up your mind that you're going to check in with your own people on both sides, right? On a daily basis, light a candle and think about them, and invite that in, meaning invite the fact that life continues, the continuity of life. I'm participating in the continuity of life. And, if you want to say a psalm at the same time, because that's the way that Black people did it, right? We integrate the psalms and we do our hoodoo practice. The Bible we think of as a magical book in and of itself, right? Who are those people who showed up at Jesus's birth? The three magi, right? The three magical beings who somehow followed that star to find this special baby. Was that astrology or what? Okay. So recognize that God is showing up in all kinds of forms, and you can open yourself and participate in any number of ways. Pray your psalms over your candle. Think about great grandma, think about granddaddy. What did they give you? What did they leave in the family line that you can plug into? Because that's special. That's what I'd say.
And if somebody would want to learn more about this, what should they do? Where should they go?
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, I got that book there, Beyond Christianity. Um, which I guess, I would say would at least introduce people to what a New Thought religion is, religious science, science of mind. Because if people are like, well, I don't know this thing. Okay, the book does walk you through in a very basic way what it is. But
and the historical roots of it, which I love.
exactly.
Yeah.
Because there's so much appropriation now, like the movie The Secret, for example, really just takes the very tip of the iceberg. So much is appropriated in the culture that if you have some interest in the historical roots and the spiritual roots of this, like where does this come from? This thing called law of attraction, where does this come from? Well, my book helps you out a lot with that. You can go online and look up Reverend Michael Beckwith. He does a lot of really good podcasts, and so follow him. He did an amazing interview with Ellen DeGeneres. So if anybody wanted to look that up, like Michael Beckwith, Ellen DeGeneres interview he did some years ago. I think it was COVID year 2020. So there's and it's only maybe 15 minutes, but it's great. My students in the classroom love it. It helps to clarify for them.
Your YouTube channel?
I was about to say, and then my own things, if you're asking me about that, then definitely my YouTube channel, Dr. Darnise's House of Religion, History, and Culture. I changed the name of it a little bit. Dr. Darnise's House. You can just look that up.
And we'll put it in the show notes.
Okay. And drdarnise.com.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, you've talked a lot about these different guides that have come into your life, and you've also coached, I don't know, I'm going to say hundreds of different people. I would love to hear you just share a little bit about one of your spiritual teachers. I know, hard to pick one maybe, but one of your spiritual teachers and who this person is and why they've had such a significant impact on you.
Wow. Well, I'm going to have to say Dr. Will Coleman on a personal level. But do you mean like a person that people would know? Oh, okay.
It can, however you want to answer it.
Yeah, Dr. Will Coleman, who is a friend of both of us. And
hopefully we'll have him on the pod too.
Yes, my goodness. He does a teaching every night on Monday nights. He's been doing that for, I don't know how many years, for 14, 15 years.
It's been a while, yeah.
He has been so helpful to me. I mean, I think every week my mind is blown. And what I mean by that is because we've been friends and I've been listening to him talk for a long time. It takes the repetition sometimes when you don't know something and someone is feeding you, pouring into you, and they keep saying the same thing, and you're kind of witnessing them and how they live and how they integrate their own spirituality and the way he teaches and the things he's been saying to me for years. And so I think I'm in a season now where a lot of the things that he's been saying to me, I'm like, oh, like every week, oh. And so I will say to him, hey, Doc, I will, after Monday night class, I'll text him. I'm like, hey, Doc, I said, thank you for being so patient with me because I'm finally getting what you've been saying to me for years. He was instrumental in me moving from LA to Savannah. I mean, I was already of a mindset to do it, but he really kept giving me the little extra bits that I needed to make the move. And, he is someone who is steeped, who's also multi-informed, metaphysically oriented, coming out of a Christian tradition as a young person, a young adult. So we share a certain sort of mix of spiritualities. And then he's also rooted in a lot of, what would we say, magical traditions of like Rosicrucian and Martinism and all kinds of things that I continue to find out like more and more and more and more. I somehow found my way to this philosophy called Martinism because it's my name. I didn't even know it existed. But then I write to him and he goes, yeah, I already studied that. I've been saying that for years. And I was like, why didn't you tell me this? He's like, why would I bring this up? But our relationship is such that he has really been pouring into me. And I think everyone needs a mentor. Everyone needs someone because none of us knows everything. And we don't know what we don't know. We don't know what direction to look in when it's time for that next thing. Or we're going to always be facing our own fears, our own limiting beliefs. And we need someone to kind of hold up something, an arrow, a mirror, or something to say, hey, to shake you every once in a while and say, hey, what are you doing over there? Or you seem to be stagnant over there. Or, hey, think about this next thing. And he has been that person for me for more years than I really even, when I really think about it, I'm like, wow, he's been there a long time. And I mean, if we have time for another synchronicity of how I even reconnected with him after many years.
We have time. Go ahead and tell it.
Just right now, I'm like, God, how did this even happen? Right. So, we went to the same graduate school in Berkeley, but he is older than I, so he graduated before me. But, his reputation was such at the school that, I knew of him. And we had mutual friends. And so one of those mutual friends, Dr. James Noel, was on my doctoral committee, and he passed away.
Yeah.
And Dr. Coleman had been very good friends with James Noel as well. So some years had passed, and then I ran into Dr. Coleman at a conference randomly.
Because he don't be going to conferences either. That's what makes it funny.
Exactly. You can't get him to leave Atlanta to go to stuff. So randomly, right? And so we had not been in touch, and so I didn't know he was going to be there. He didn't know I was going to be there. We hadn't even really thought about each other, I don't think. So anyway, I come to this conference, and he's actually speaking. I come in late, and he's on stage speaking, and I'm looking at it like, what? And so afterwards, I reconnect with him, and he's like, "Where have you been?" I said, "What do you mean, where have I been?" "I've been expecting you." I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "Well, because James Noel died, who I considered to be such a mentor to me in my graduate program. So when he passed away, it's like Will Coleman was saying to me, yeah, well, now I'm going to pick that up and carry on with you." Oh. Without saying it in those words, it was like, oh, like grab me by the arm, let's go. And it's so special to me because of that, because I'm like, he didn't have to do that. But he just sort of like picked up the mantle that James Noel left and said, come this way. And so it's to me, a very special relationship. And so I'm glad you asked me that question, actually.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. Can you just tell us one more time where people can find you?
Yes. So drdarnise.com is my website. Gosh, on socials, I mean, I'm Dr. Darnise everywhere. Facebook and Instagram, I guess.
Or whatever other socials will be on.
I know. Yeah, should I go to another social, it'll still be Dr. Darnise. And then my YouTube channel, Dr. Darnise's House of Religion, Magic, and History, or whatever it's called now, but just Dr. Darnise on YouTube also.
So we can find you there.
You can find me there. You can Google me. If you Google me, it'll all come up as well.
Well, I thank you so much for your time, for sharing, about your faith with our listeners, for having this conversation. Oh, you know what? There is one question I didn't get to ask you. See, I'm all at the end. One more question I wanted to ask you. And this is a conversation you and I have been also having for 20 years. So tell, I'm asked, I want to know what your answer is. I don't know if I even know the answer, right? Where is justice or liberation, right? In your spiritual path, right? Is there a politic at all, would you say, in your spiritual path, in this journey that you talk about?
Yes, we have been having this conversation for 20 whatever years.
Well, I've been asking the question.
From the first time I met her, the first thing.
I have questions.
What's this new thing, thought thing?
It wasn't a challenge. It was a real question.
I know, but it was so good, and it's so relevant and necessary, right? And so over the years, right, New Thought has tried to be more attentive. I mean, it's always been there, sort of under the surface, but to be more attentive. So what I will say now is I'm plugging into this idea that life should work for everyone, right? And so what kind of God do we even say is there? Who is God, right? Life should work for everyone. Okay, so when it doesn't, what can we do about let's just say political forces or whatever social forces, what can we then do when it doesn't work for everyone? Because the way God has set this thing up is it should work for everyone. Okay, so then when it's not, then there's a glitch in the system.
Mm-hmm.
There are glitches. Okay, well, how do we address the glitches? So there are many people in New Thought, I mean, I just have to say, who would say, well, I'll just treat for that, right? Which means pray about it. Thoughts and prayers, right? And we're like, no, that's not sufficient. I mean, yay, go pray, but we've got to be boots on the ground about these things, because we can see and we can identify the glitches. And so for me, I've been challenging my New Thought community about this. So I have a private Facebook group actually for Black people in New Thought. Well, not even New Thought on Purpose, it's called, not just for Black people, but New Thought on Purpose, where we talk about these things. And so Reverend David Alexander, who is based in Atlanta, white New Thought minister, actually, he is one of the most progressive, politically oriented New Thought ministers I know. And so he just published a book on New Thought liberation theology, actually, because it is the intention to address the glitches, to bring a New Thought perspective to the political system. Because what? Life should work for everyone. And if it's not, if you're talking to a politician or a particular political party or whatever it is, you're blocking the flow of life. Your policies block the flow. What are you going to do about that? Like, we can now stand as a community of New Thought people and say, we might not exactly say it that way at a political sort of rally, for example, or town hall meeting, but essentially to stand on our own belief system. Life should work for everyone, and critique the system that is responsible for the glitch. Why are people hungry? Why are people excluded from certain whatever avenues of life? Why don't people have health care? You're blocking the flow. And so I think I can say that, excuse me, more clearly now than I could 20 years ago. Because I've always been working on it in my mind, always working on it, which is why I created that New Thought on Purpose Facebook group, because I wanted a space where we in New Thought could talk about it with each other and, you know, hammer it out. So
now, to make it more complex, as a hoodooist, right? Where is the role of justice, maybe fairness, freedom, right? I mean, for understandable reasons, Black people are often and always concerned, right, about being more free, particularly Black people in the U.S., but you know, diasporically, right?
Right. So, and with my hoodoo mindset, I would say that Black people would say, oh, I'm going to have my justice. Oh, I'm going to have it. And so I propose it to you this way. What is the difference between medicine and poison? The dose. So what I am doing in my hoodoo practice, I might say, well, I'm working on this tea. I'm brewing a tea because I don't know, I have chronic headaches or whatever, and it helps me. But if these people insist on taking me to a place where I have to protect myself or my community, then I know that a little extra this, a little extra that becomes poison for someone. If it becomes that I've got to protect myself, if it's me or you, I will have my justice, right? And so from a perspective of people, African American people who created or brought this spirituality with us and fashioned it in this land, it really was like, okay, well, in a lot of cases, it's me or you up against this system that is increasingly trying to oppress me, to kill me, to annihilate me. I've got to have some kind of resistance, and hoodoo is about resistance, and therefore it's one could say it's amoral. One could say, like, I mean, what are you bringing to me? What is the energy you're bringing to me? And I might say I'm going to meet that energy. I'm going to call upon my ancestors to help me meet that energy, because it's not just me, right? To call upon my ancestors who've been here before, and they know that beast, right? They're like, oh yeah, I know that, right? Oh yeah. Make sure you put some extra cayenne in that, right?
Yeah.
Because right, and it's a spiritual practice to say, to invite in the wisdom of the ancestors, right? To allow it to bubble up in within, because it is the DNA. Here's something I got from Dr. Coleman. He reminds me all the time. You absolutely are your ancestors. It is
Well,
the
and we're both people who teach in, have taught and teach in Black Studies departments, and it is, a very well-known kind of historical fact for those who study enslavement and freedom, right? That one of the many forms of resistance that enslaved African Americans sometimes used, right, was the poisoning of, right, enslavers, right, particularly those who had access to the kitchen. And, I know many of my colleagues think of this and talk about this, right, as historical, as resistance, as a kind of marronage. And I like that you're reminding us it's actually a spiritual system too.
yeah,
Hmm.
because we can't do it without a connection,
Right.
right? We really um, don't necessarily know what to do without the spiritual direction and the influence of our ancestors. Um, and that's why it's important to know, oh, I have their DNA.
Hmm.
Like, and I think we forget that.
Hmm.
We literally are them now.
Like literally, we look like
Literally.
them, right?
Exactly. Like if you
Yeah.
look, people say, what do you mean? Think about who you look like in your family. When you look across the table at any gathering, do you see the family resemblance?
Mhm.
Right? In my family, like it's just incredible, right? You see the family resemblance, you have the mannerisms of whomever, right? And so you just go back a few generations, you're like, yeah, because that's always been the case. So here,
Mhm.
their gene pool still showing up today, right? I still
Right.
have their genes,
Mhm.
and it's still informing me if I will plug into it and helping me to survive the beast in, the 21st century, whatever the shenanigans are, right? Like Jim Crow is now James Crow Esquire, right? So, okay, he's got on a suit and he's about to take the power back, but whatever. How do I survive this?
Mhm.
Okay, well, I know some ways. And so, um, and it's about intention, right? So this is how I marry the two of New Thought. Why I say New Thought and Hoodoo. Like in New Thought, it's really about setting the intention in consciousness.
Right.
I could sit there in a room, right, and just, really meditate and get very clear about my intention. And or I could light a candle and I could mix some herbs together, right? So that
Mhm.
gives my hands something to do while I am in consciousness, formulating, visioning what it is I want to see happen in my world. And in some traditions, like Catholics, some people, they have the rosary beads, the Buddhists, they have the beads, right? So they're praying, they've got candles lit, they've got the incense going. So they're exercising or including all of their senses.
Mhm.
And so with my New Thought and my Hoodoo, I say, oh, okay, well, I'm integrating this thing and using all of my senses. I'm inviting people to the party, my people to my practice. So and sometimes people raise the question, well, can people practice Hoodoo who are not Black?
And
Well, I ask them, well, who are your ancestors?
Mhm.
Because this was made as a form of resistance for Black people. And we call upon our ancestors. So if you're not Black, who are you calling upon and for what? Because we're kind of at odds. I mean, and so
Yeah.
I kind of bounce it back to them, and I really encourage, because it's come up in classes, and I encourage people who are white people. I say, well, you have important traditions in Europe,
Yeah.
and really, you should really plug into the traditions where you have blood in the ground.
Mhm.
I have blood in this ground. If you're from Ireland or Germany, wherever, Scandinavia, Try to plug into those indigenous practices. Go back and talk to the oldest people in your family. Get that wisdom.
Yeah.
That's what you need. Because over here in Hoodoo, my Black ancestors are helping me to survive as a Black person. That's specifically what this is for. So you should probably find out what your European ancestors have for you, because that's rich. It's not even a diss or anything. I'm just saying that's probably where your power lies.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. Your resistance might not be like mine.
I'm so glad we opened up this thread of the conversation. And again, I'm just so grateful for you taking the time to, stop by the podcast and, share your journey with listeners as people know where they can find you. drdarnise.com and all the other places you can find a person will be Dr. Darnise. That's Darnise. And again, I encourage you all to stay tuned for the next episode. Keep listening, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep breaking the rules.
I love that. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Diverse Devotions, Black Belief Across Boundaries. I hope today's conversation has sparked something in you, whether it's a question, a new insight, or simply a deeper understanding of the many ways Black folk engage with spirituality and religion. Remember to check out the show notes for more resources. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe or follow, rate, and share to help others discover the power of diverse religious experiences. We'd love to hear from you, so leave a comment or send us a message about your thoughts and experiences at diversedevotions.com. Until next time, keep questioning, keep seeking, and keep breaking the rules of how faith is supposed to work.